Good morning, everyone. Happy Sabbath. Welcome back to another Sabbath school lesson in the study of education. This week, we're going to be touching on lesson 10, which is education in arts and sciences. So before we begin, can we have a prayer? Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for another Sabbath day. We thank you for the opportunity to study your word, which you've given us to teach us about the way to salvation. I pray that as we study this lesson, that you'll give us wisdom and understanding. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
So before we begin, I would like to introduce the members of our panel. So we have Anaya Harrison. She's a student at the University of Delaware. She's musically and intellectually gifted and actively involved as a young adult at West Wilmington. So hi, Anaya. And then we have Richard Agard, fondly known as Rich. He's no stranger to us, and he has a love for mission work and has given many years of service to youth and young adults here at West Wilmington. Welcome, Rich.
Thank you.
We have Joel Amenya, who, while he is a member at Life in Christ, has been a participant of a few of our Sabbath School panels, as well as in other programs and activities here at West Wilmington. So, hi, Joel.
Hi.
We have Jack Semi. He's the youth and young adult ministry leader at West Wilmington. He's a preacher as well as a staff member of the West Wilmington Wolverine Pathfinder Club. Hi, Jack. And we have Jolene Alsop, who is a member of the Grand Concourse Seventh-day Adventist Church in the Bronx, New York. She's an active young adult at her church involved in women's ministry, ushers ministry, and also as a Sabbath school teacher for the children. So welcome, Jolene, as our guest today. And I'm your moderator for the morning, Kezia. So as I stated before, the lesson for this week focuses on Christian education as it relates to the arts and sciences. And the lesson says that there is evidence of the living God in all of his creations. So panel, do you see this as a literal statement or more the use of figurative language? Anyone can feel free to jump in on this.
Well, I'll start because I have no shame and I'm bold like that. But I think it's a literal statement because I question if it's not a literal statement. I ask you, what is God not a part of? Because if somebody could tell me that, then I'll be really impressed. Because no matter what it is, good or bad, we all know there's a spiritual war. But God he literally has his hand in everything. Because it's the same thing like, with Satan has his own lane. But God even has his hand in Lucifer because he created him and he created the angels. So when I see it, it doesn't matter if it's from microbes to grand skyscrapers. God has his hand in everything on this planet. So,
anyone else want to take a step?
I agree. Like, it is definitely a literal statement. If you take maybe things like, just like even our bodies, they're just so wonderfully made, and despite being so complex and having so many moving parts, they somehow they're able to work together. And yet, even if the slightest thing is off, like one gene out of thousands or like millions, well, actually billions of base pairs, you can have all kinds of problems or the inability to actually live. And if that doesn't show that someone created us or created the world around, like, carefully and with thought, then I don't know what else does.
Is there anything figurative about that statement? Because, the lesson kind of goes into a mother and the gestation of her child and how the child, is, as it grows, gets closer to her heart. And, the author goes on to explain how that is representing like God's love, that in our creation, we are close to God's heart. And so do you think there is something figurative about that statement, that there's evidence of a living God in all of his creation?
Yeah, I mean, I think I will take both. I think it is both literal but also figurative, because the idea, as Rich has laid it out, and Jolene, there is a sense that in everything is so precisely designed such that any little tweaking affects so much, right? And then the idea that, the God who gives life is the one who has enabled the people to do the things they do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Without God giving life to man, there are no skyscrapers. So in a literal sense, then God is in everything. But I think it's also figurative because it's pointing us to the picture that God frames how we engage in the world, right? And so, like for example, the sun, right? The sun gives life to every being, right? But you're not literally saying the sun goes into every house and gives life to every being that lives in there, right? There is a sense in which the sun is a symbol for how God shines and gives life to those things that are essential, that then lead to the continuation or the extension of life in different spaces and different ways.
Yeah, and I think, people talk about the figurative aspect of that statement. And even in the things that are created that may seem bad, like the leaves falling and dying at the end of summertime, or that roses have thorns, even in those things, we still see God's hand in it and his love, because we can think about the leaves dying and then the trees come to life again in the spring. And we can think about how that can be representative of our own lives, that even in moments of like spiritual death, when we have the sun shining on us and his warmth, then we can be renewed and become alive again. So I think even in the natural processes or creative processes, even the artistic processes, somebody that can draw, somebody that can paint, when you think about an artist sitting and drawing a masterpiece, and you think about, like Jolene mentioned, our bodies and the way that it's structured, we can consider ourselves to be God's masterpieces. So even in the artistic form, the figurative form, definitely I would say and agree with most of you guys that it's both literal and figurative. Here's another question. So at what age were you first introduced to evolution from a religious background? What were you told? And the reason I'm asking this question is because we're talking about education in arts and sciences. And I guess one of the major in your face things about science, when you think about science and religion, is we think about evolution, right? So it's either you believe in creation or you believe in evolution. So we all grew up in church, which I would assume means that we all believe in creation. Would that be fair to say that? So then the opposite
Yes.
would be that the world believes in evolution. So what were you first taught about evolution? Who taught it to you? At what age were you? And what were you told? From a religious forum.
From a religious forum, trying to remember. I'm battling between literally being at Oakwood like over 4 years ago, or probably just hearing it in church. But when I was younger, and I'm thinking as far as, I don't think there was really any in depth of this is presenting evolution at in a I guess in an intellectual way, but more so in a way to refute it. Every time evolution is presented in church, whether it be through the lesson books, back then, or any other lesson, it's scoffed at. It's like, how can we believe we came from monkeys, so on and so forth. So I think probably came to a more intellectual understanding of it in college. But as far as it being introduced to me, it was like when I was just being a youth in church, but it was always presented as an idea that is to be refuted at all costs.
I think for me, I first learned about evolution as in like the scientific kind of secular version of evolution. Probably around like third grade, we had some lesson about this is how the world was created and blah, blah, blah. And I would just go home and like tell my parents about it, and they would kind of like explain like more what they believed about it. So that gave me some context kind of. Like Jax was saying, I don't think it's ever been presented to me in a like religious evolution. Is that kind of your question?
Well, in a religious form. So at church or by your parents or by somebody who believes in creation, I should say.
Yeah, well, yeah, I would say it was probably from a young age. And then as I went on like in my education years, it was like presented again and again.
Myself,
Yeah, I think.
okay, go ahead.
Go ahead, Joel.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think it has come in different shapes and forms at different points, and I think for me, it wasn't so much within the educational system that I got it, but more so within the church context. And of course, as Jack was saying, it was always brought up in the context of this: we should be rejecting this, we should be refuting it because it goes against the foundation of what we believe, and it's undermining the very values that we are trying to espouse as believers within our faith.
Go ahead, Rich.
I was just gonna say, also for me, it was very different depending on my location. So, when I was in Trinidad, it's very, it wasn't really in depth. It was just like, it's ludicrous to believe evolution, and it was almost put on me as like, what are those Americans teaching you type of deal. And then I would come to America and it was like, it wasn't as like aggressive, but at the same time, like when I would be in, let's say the black area, say Philly, it was closer to Trinidad. And then when I was in the wider area, say Hershey, it was very, I want to say the lines were more blurred. It wasn't as defined. Neither situation did they give me examples or actually explain to me. It was just like, it was almost like battle lines. It was like, if you're on our team, this is what you believe. If you're not on our team, this is what you believe. And that's where it was put. It was only until like I really got interested in the science that it was really, this is what you believe and why you should believe it.
So can one of our, science brainiacs tell us what evolution is? What does a theory actually say? Anyone want to take a stab at that? What the theory actually says? Or do any of us actually know what the theory says?
I mean, I could Google it for you, but I mean, it's, there's so many interpretations, especially like there's so many variants to evolution, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
But I see it as evolution is basically a theory of, it started from a big bang, which was basically, you think about all the atoms in the universe came down smaller to like the head of a needle. And then there was so much energy that it combusted and it expanded outwards, and it started the chain reaction, which is a lot at the beginning. A lot of it was microbes, and it evolved to different stages, which then evolved into more complex life as the generic version.
Okay. I think it's interesting, I had to throw that question in because a lot of people say, I don't believe in evolution. Like, evolution is stupid. But if you ask them, like, okay, what does the theory of evolution actually say? Like, they aren't actually able to answer that. They don't know what it is. So they don't believe something that they don't actually know. So it was, I guess I was interested in kind of seeing how many of us would actually be able to say, if asked, what is the theory of evolution, would be able to actually answer. And, I know you mentioned, the Big Bang, and then there are also theories that surrounding evolution that say, like, humans came from monkeys or developed from fish, and even some of those theories were disputed, and people are like, no, that doesn't even make sense. And I know the one theory that kind of has continued throughout now, present day, is the idea of natural selection, that we adapt to our environments, and that species or organisms that are able to develop characteristics or genes that allow them to survive within a certain environment, they continue and they pass those on to their offspring. And the ones that aren't able to adapt, they end up dying. So can this hold any weight to a Christian? Can that idea of adaptation, or of I guess I don't want to use the word mutation, but developing or changing of genetics or body characteristics or whatever to suit your environment, can that hold weight to a Christian who believes in creation? Is there something that is valid in that argument? Joe,
What I
you look like you
find,
want to say
yeah,
something.
what I find interesting, I was hoping somebody could jump in. What I find interesting is that, the theory of evolution is the background of its founding, or how Darwin comes up with it. It's just through a scientific method, right? And we all subscribe to the scientific method, to scientific inquiry, right? And within the field of anthropology, that is how the journey looks like, and that's what they came up with. And I think there is, as you were saying, Kazia, there is this tendency for us to wholesale condemn things we don't know, right? So if you actually don't know what the details are, what the parts of this theory is made of, but because maybe, and as Rich was saying, you're in one tribe, you say, hey, this is what we believe. We don't even want to hear, we don't want to understand. We just know that that's the wrong thing and that's a bad thing. And I think sometimes that's dangerous because, again, the challenge that comes up is when you go into these spaces like into high school or into college, and then you get to sit in a class and somebody really breaks it down for you and makes a very strong case, then now you have to reevaluate everything all over again, right? So I think the ability for us to be open to at least listen to what it entails is very important, right? And it helps us so that even as we try to think about how the argument for the story of creation can be made and can counter whatever is being produced by the theory of evolution, can be more comprehensive. And so, I think it's important that we appreciate what some of the elements of the theory of evolution are championing, because it's not altogether summarily a bad thing. There are elements about, for example, the progression of different species to adapt to different environments. I mean, this is something that they have scientifically proven that it happens. So that's an element you can take out and say, hey, this is something that makes sense and it's within certain bounds, but it can be applied as a wholesale way to look at life, because as Christians, we believe that the design of a human being is a very intentional process that God embarked on, right? And so we can't reduce a human being into some story of starting from, a tiny particle and then becoming what we are. We know that for us, the story is different. The story we tell about the human journey is different than what the story of evolution is trying to tell us.
Can I throw out a question on top of that question?
Sure.
So one thing that I like to throw out a question, bear with me, because I do have ADHD and my brain does go all over the place. So when the Egyptians, when Israel left Egypt, right?
Mm-hmm.
Were they the same after the 40 years, or were they different?
It's a good question.
Because remember, it was 40 years in the desert.
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. I mean, I cannot specifically say because I don't have any pictures or anything to like look into a comparison, but I would think because their diet would have changed.
What exactly? And maybe Rich, you can tell us what exactly are you looking at to have changed or not changed? Is it their appearance, their food?
Yeah. So when we're talking about like evolution and adaptation, what I'm seeing is so you had, I don't know how many years they were in Egypt, but mad years where they're doing physical labors, literally building things.
Yeah.
400 plus. So they were building things that, it was very manual labor. Let's move, let's carve, let's do things. Then the next 40 years was more of extreme walking with heat, and the labor wasn't the same. It was still a different labor, but like you got to even think of body composition. You got to think about like, how much water was needed per day. Like there's a lot of aspects when we think of this story that we don't think about scientifically, because there's no way you can tell me, okay, so say I left Egypt, I'm 20, right? So by the time at the end, I'm 60, right? That's totally different than if I was born on the travels, because that's now all I know, and how my body has adapted to growing was now every day I wake up and I walk a certain amount of miles and I eat this manna, and there's no real other meals compared to in Egypt, where now I'm eating who knows what, and I'm lifting things, and it's just the aspect of your daily life is completely different. It's the same thing. Like if you have, like Joel, I'll throw out even Kenya, right? In Kenya, you moved and you ate extremely differently than how you move and eat now. So is your body the same? Are you changing? Like, and that's even on a small scale. So if you do that over a large scale of 500, 1,000 years, like you can't tell me there is no real adaptation. So it's really, where is our boundary lie in that sense, unless you look at the macro, which is evolution from the whole story. But the thing is, I also want to throw out is Satan is he's very experienced. True. And there's no way he's going to give you something that's 100% lie. It's going to be 99.99% truth. And like, once we understand that, you can't throw the truth out with the lie, because then that destroys your whole argument.
Yeah, because I was going to say, I mean, even in that idea of, the adaptations, it still, to me at least, shows an evidence of there being a God, because who controls the fact that these adaptations are going to happen? You know what I mean? Like, God understood, okay, people who are going to live in hotter climates where the sun is going to be more intense need to have more melanin in their skin so that they can withstand the heat of the sun. People who live in colder climates will tend to be more lighter skin, Caucasian, whatever, because it's suited to the environment that they live in. Like, even that idea of the body being able to adapt so that people don't die in the environment, for me, there has to be somebody controlling that. Like, that's how I see it. But then there will be people who have arguments toward that. And I guess, in a sense, one of the biggest things that come to my mind when I think about arts and sciences is, one, you have to have faith in either one or the other. All of it is crazy when you think about it. The fact that, the earth will start from like an atom and explode, that takes a level of faith and believing in something that seems impossible. Creation also takes a level of faith in believing something that seems impossible, that there's a God who existed and no one created him, but he created everything else. So I think faith is even the key when it comes to education in arts and sciences, like teaching about the faith. But we'll get to that nearer to the end. Richard, it sounds like you were going to say something.
Well, I feel like, especially what you're saying and what I experience is our starting point. So you're starting from the point of, God is real, and you branch outwards. Yes. Yes. Someone else that believes in evolution is starting from a place of God is not real, so I'm going to branch outwards. A discussion that I have with my best friend, he is an atheist, is every time we talk about religion, he always says, your God. Like, did your God do this? And he says it aggressively. And it's funny. At the beginning, I used to be like, well, like it's almost like I took offense to it. But then I started leaning into it. I was like, yeah, it is my God. Like, say something about him. Like, I'm ready to ride. But like, it's so funny. He even acknowledges a lot of our beliefs and where we come from. It's just that his starting point, he has some trauma in his life, and his starting point it comes from a point of, I know one of your questions when you're talking about like bad things that happen is he can't see the spiritual war. Mm-hmm. For him, if God is alive, we should be in this utopia, and there should be no sin, no heartache. Everybody should be like just in harmony. But we, as experienced Christians, we know there is a spiritual war. So if you can't see God in things, if you're not willing to open your heart to him, that's why he says open your heart, open the door, because he's knocking. And the thing is, if you're sitting inside and you're thinking it's a boogeyman outside you never open, then you'll never get to that relationship where you know him, where you can see his miracles, because he has a lot of blessings. I have a lot of blessings. We all have a lot of blessings, but unless you're willing to see God in it, you just chuck it up as chance, which that is much of evolution is chance and how things just randomly happen instead of us seeing the beauty in the chaos, which is Christ.
Well, you just, touched on it, Rich, but the lesson talks about God being the creator of all things beautiful. And how do we reconcile, or for a person who, like you mentioned, their starting point is there is no God, for that person, even, how do we reconcile the idea of a child being born with severe deformities, or having absolutely no quality of life, with the idea that God is the creator of all things beautiful? Where's the God who supposedly fashioned and formed everything with his hands? Like, did he mess up when he was creating this person? Or is it another thing of like, well, natural selection, if you don't adapt, you don't live? And there are people who even feel that way. I mean, this is getting kind of a little into a rabbit hole, but there are even people who feel that, if you're don't have certain genes within you, if you don't look a certain way, if you weren't created in a certain way that people have the idea that people need to look, then you don't deserve to be on this earth. So how do we reconcile that idea of God being the creator of all things beautiful with the idea that there are people who are born with severe deformities and no quality of life?
If I go ahead, and
No, go ahead.
okay. If I may, like, I guess when you was talking, I was really trying to reconcile it in my mind. I was like, it's a tough question to really approach, because it's battling, what I'm probably, like, how I'm raised and how, just, I guess, personal beliefs on the situation, as opposed to understanding that, yes, God does create the beautiful, but, in the world that we live in, it is marred by sin. And that is coming from a Christian perspective, and we understand that it is not him who created deformities, but these deformities are a result of, the sin-stained world that we live in. So the deformities aren't, like, he has given the opportunity of life, but this life has been marred by sin in a way where others, weren't as marred, I guess you can say, in a sense. But where we know what the lesson has shared is that beauty is more, I won't say it's skin deep. It's more, it's like beauty in the eyes of God, as the Bible says. Like, men look on the outward, but he looks on the inside. So he's more focused on the beauty of character, and and bringing out the beauty of holiness into our own lives. So where, the whole idea of beauty is an eye of the beholder, God's infinite vision, he holds beauty in a different light than we can begin to fathom, in my honest opinion. So it's, yes, the person is born with deformities, but these deformities, can be seen as a uniqueness, or in its own way, a form of beauty in the eyes of God, where it is something that was, maybe allowed or even permitted, eventually for his glory, considering, it is according to his will, but also is just where the character is really what is really what, God tries to form and to make beautiful, and in the realm of holiness, if that, this is the suffice.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think one of our main problems as Christians is that we try to have everything be black and white. So it's either you believe fully in creation, you believe fully in evolution, you believe only all things can be good, or like because things are bad, then there's no God. And I think we do that because our like human minds aren't comfortable with not knowing, which is completely normal. But I think we need to kind of get out of that mindset, because if we don't, then that leaves space for people to say, well, how does God exist when things like this happen? And in actuality, we know that like God is the I am. He's everything, and like more than even our brains can like comprehend. He's like an abstract, like um I don't even know how to explain what I'm trying to say, but I think just overall, if we have a more like gray kind of look at things, as in like not black or white, that helps solve more things. Because once we like understand that we can't know everything, we don't know why things happen like that. We don't know why people are born with deformities. We don't know, none of us were there at creation, and we like choose to have faith that this is what God says and this is what happened. But none of us really know. So once we accept that, I think it'll be a lot easier for people who, like Rich was saying, like who come from the mindset of, oh, well, God doesn't exist and this is where I'm going to branch off from. I think it becomes easier for them to see where we're coming from when we don't come from such a hard stance.
And I
Yeah, because
go ahead, Joel.
Jolene, you want to say something?
You could go first.
Go ahead. No, I was just going to add to what is being said here, because I think the idea of deformity is an interesting one, but we know that the central argument of believers is that God's creation was perfect, right? It has always been the case, but then the journey of the story is such that at some point that perfection was deeply marred and deeply distorted by sin. And I think for each and every one of us, and more so anybody who professes to be a Christian, we know that within ourselves we are deformed deeply, right? And so the very fact that we seek salvation in Jesus Christ is because he's the one who offers this new sense of completion, this new beauty, this new wholesomeness. And so I think the question you're asking, Kazia, is a great one, but I mean, the Christian framework accommodates for it by saying that this is not God's intention for his creation, right? God never meant to have us deformed, and even for somebody to be born deformed. But the nature of the freedom he gave us led us down a path that caused us to actually cause that deformation, and is in the process of restoring us back to that perfect state again.
I agree with that. And that made me think of something I had read a while ago. It was about like Africa, and it was speaking about sickle cell anemia, and how, as it says, basically there's a gene where like that people had, and it would kind of slightly it affects the shape of the red blood cells, and that was helpful in making it so that people wouldn't really die of malaria as like almost a response to it. And yet, so in a form of natural selection, people who had that gene, if they mated with other people with the same gene, their children, like they have better chances of like kind of avoiding malaria, at least not being as heavily affected. However, on the flip side, you have two of those traits come together and you have sickle cell anemia. And that made me think of, basically, creation was meant to be perfect, but maybe there could be room to think of, is it like, because we end up falling in sin, God's like, okay, people need to be able to adapt to these new environments that are no longer perfect the way that I intended it to be and wanted it to be. And in that adaptation, there's chaos, there's beauty, but there could also be, I lost the word, but
there can also
almost ugliness in it. Yes, like ugliness in it as well. So I don't know. That's one thing I've been thinking of, is it's kind of still something that was set in motion by God to help, but there is still chaos in it because of our sinker's nature, if that makes sense.
So the lesson talks about people of God, and I think specifically he said, or she, Seventh-day Adventist Christians must carefully consider their own business in serving certain industries, patronizing certain establishments, consuming certain media. And it got me thinking about, certain professions that we may do, like biology, and say you're studying, genetics and how to create another species based on like combining two genetics genes together, like creating a liger or whatever other things. Like, do you think there's a point where in a profession you can border on playing God, where it's no longer just using your wisdom and skills? Because the author did mention about being experts in error, and how even with the knowledge that God gave, sometimes we become so consumed in our knowledge and so proud of our own knowledge that we take it too far. Do you think there's a point where we're playing God, I would say, in trying to know too much or trying to do too much with the knowledge that we have? Or do you think that God wants us to continue to know and try and do as much as we possibly can?
Can I counter your question with a question?
Yes.
When have we not tried to play God?
That is a good point, and that makes you think of a Jurassic Park quote. You were, one of the scientists says, your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they didn't stop to think if they should, which sometimes I feel can play a role in sometimes what we do as humans. We are so busy thinking about the possibilities of our own form of creation that we don't stop to think of whether it should, like whether you can make a human chimpanzee hybrid, which Soviets did a while ago, true story, or maybe if we should allow Algerian mice and regular common house mice to mate, which apparently are immune to warfarin, so they kind of are pesticide immune, which was not a fun thing to find out. And we have these things, but I think that ultimately God does want us to use the knowledge that he gave us, use the tools he gave us to expand. Like we are told, it says in the Bible, like we are, like human will grow knowledge. And I feel like that curiosity is something that God would want us to have, to explore, but there are points where maybe we should be able to look back and think of, is this really something that we should be doing just because we could? Should we?
But and then going like I agree with your points fully, but it's something that I argue about when I do missions, because so you have Adventists who, I'm trying to phrase this the right way, guys. They don't believe in science to the point that it's so crazy detrimental. Prime example, we're all, well, a lot of us are foreigners here, but breast cancer. Like, I know a lot of Adventists that when they get breast cancer, they start purifying fruits and they start doing everything but science. I know a lot of Adventists that I go there and I'm like, we're gonna have free prostate exams, and they come up to me and they're like, but I'm not gay. And I'm like, bro, like, as a black man, like, you know how many people die of colon cancer, of so many different things. And we've warped it to the point where it doesn't make sense. Because I feel personally, the reason why I asked that question, I personally believe we've always done it. And we don't know how the earth was before the flood. But if you believe that before the flood, they were just like, they had no science, I think you're crazy. I think you're crazy. It's the same reason why we can't explain the pyramids. We can't explain a lot of things from before, because we don't know how it was done. But let me tell you, them dudes were doing science. They were doing science, and they were studying the same thing we're studying now. And that's why in the Bible it said, like, it had to reset, because the thing is, when we get more knowledge, we become evil. There is no, like, good part of humans. Like when we get an advantage, we don't help others. It's so like, even when people ask me, they're like, Rich, why do you do so much missions and stuff? And I'm like, whoa, that's not me. I'm just trying to reflect what God has given me. Like, don't put that on me. Like, if I'm some superhero doing anything, because I'm trash. We're all trash. We're dirty rags. And we really, it doesn't, even when I'm thinking about mission trips, I think about all the people who do mission trips and then they started abusing children. I think about all the people who did mission trips and started testing out syphilis and all kinds of things on people that shouldn't have had it. I started thinking about like how people, basically took their resources. Listen, humans are full of sin, and unless Christ is in our life, Satan has control. So I personally believe science is there for us, and God has given beautiful minds the ability to do amazing things. But if Christ is not at the center, then I would run from it like it was the nuclear holocaust. Because, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to add, I mean, you make a good point there, Rich. I think that's why we are called to be the salt of the earth. I don't think that we necessarily shy away from these fields are exploring new levels of maybe solutions to challenging problems in the world. I think the Christians introduce a different agenda for why they're doing it, right? So even as Jolene is saying, should I, because I could, should I do it? Can I, should I go ahead and do something just because I can? But Christians are always pursuing a higher mission, right? They are trying to serve. There's something beyond their own glory, their own fame that is driving them to discover medication, to find a new way to move around so that people can fly and help others in Australia. So I think we cannot put a boundary into what needs to be done as much as say, what is the motivation? What is the intention? Because again, as we are saying, science is there to serve us. God has given us these curious minds that want to discover, that want to explore. So how do we employ these natural abilities that God has given us in a way that actually serves him and in a way that is fruitful? Because that's the mission God sent Adam and Eve out for, to go and be fruitful. We lost you there, Kezia.
She's still muted.
You're muted.
So apparently my computer didn't want the unmute button to work. I was like tapping, and wouldn't unmute.
Your computer obviously was not paying attention to what was said. Just because it could keep you muted doesn't mean that it should keep you muted.
There you go. There you go. Technology.
I know, right? Like, Rich, you made a really good point, which is that with all the knowledge that we can ever have and all the intelligence and wisdom that we could ever have, if we forget that all of that comes from God and we lose sight of who is meant to be honored and glorified with that, it's only a matter of time before we become self-absorbed and it begins to be used in ways that it's not meant to be used in. Because, even the lesson mentioned it, all the knowledge we have is coming from God. The smartest person in the world didn't bring that intelligence out of nowhere. They were gifted with that by God. And what they choose to do with that gift, ends up being up to them. So with that being said, should we in Adventist schools, homes, churches, should we really emphasize science, not just from the creative or the creation point of view, but also talk about evolution? And, because Richie talked about there are some people who completely reject science because they're Christians. And we mentioned earlier that, and I think Naya said it, that we tend to sometimes be all or nothing. So it's either we're all creation and completely reject any worldly views of science, or we're all worldly, view. And so you can't have a balance of both. Do you think that there needs to be a balance of both as far as what we're teaching in, Christian homes, schools, churches?
Yes. Oh,
Yep.
sorry.
No, go ahead.
There definitely needs to be a balance. We are like, it would be a shame to squander our gifts and our talents, like, and our God-given ability, like cognitive abilities, because of this asinine idea that there's only one. I watched this documentary talking about like some miracles from the Bible, and they were also using like the scientific maybe background, maybe behind like how this happens, like when the Red Sea was split, they mentioned like a war wave. It was interesting. And one person who was I think a priest, also I think like church of like a scientific body, he said, and it stuck with me, religion is the why, but science is the how. And that's kind of like we cannot understand the world we're in. We cannot navigate the world we're in without trying to understand the world that we're in. And we understand that through science. And without that, we aren't able to do things. And there's so many things that have been, like we could say, have gone towards the further of God's kingdom through science, like medical missionaries, or the fact that maybe we are able to prevent people from dying from something like they didn't get enough orange juice on their voyage across the sea, or figuring out, hey, if we use this and we inject it, you're not going to die. You're not going to die like after slipping into a diabetic coma. Like we have insulin. Like we have all these things, and rejecting this is in a way almost rejecting God's creation through us, or his creation in general, because he has given us so many of the tools and the ability to understand, to at least whatever degree that we can, what he has presented for us. So we should be trying to like accept that and further along like that work. But still, we should also remember too, like maybe who we're ultimately trying to glorify.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Jolene. And the idea is just proper balance. Being either black or white, as I say, there's really no balance. And just thinking about like, so this week, and Caleb's like little, like he used ABC Mouse with his like little learning academy. So it's really neat. And this week is learning about cycles, animal cycles, human cycles, cycles in nature. And, when I think about like the cycle of like photosynthesis, like I would never learn about photosynthesis in Bible class. So but even understanding, the whole idea of photosynthesis, one, the knowledge that, a plant goes through this cycle or has a cycle like this, we know that it is attributed to God. And, that is like, I want to say it's like it's like something that should happen in full circle. God gives a knowledge and we discover, a cycle like this, and we're like, wow, okay, so I see the fingerprint of God, and now the glory goes back to him. So it's a cycle. It's like, hey, like this is, consider this. It's like, oh, okay, I see. So, but the thing is, like, there was the issue that happened is that a disconnect happened between the glory going back to God.
Mm-hmm.
And when the lesson talks about how, the creation is worshipped, and then we lose sight of the creator. I think that's what the danger is. But as far as just, learning sciences and as from a Christian standpoint, it is necessary because it will give, our children a better understanding. So when they are approached with tough subjects of evolution or other theories that we may not agree with, they're like, okay, I learned this. Like Anaya said, like, when she brought back what she learned from school and her parents, allowed and like explain that, just we're thankful for that, your parents were able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But I know a lot of us, some of our parents, I know from mine, they weren't able to, to finish college because, they had to get their, coming into the United States and just knowing how just working hard to get, their kids through school and stuff like that. So, I wouldn't be able to go to my mom and be like, hey, can you explain this theory? without her coming from, you know, just the religious standpoint and just leaving it from there. So the proper understanding is necessary in order for, you know, for us and for our children to have a balanced view and understand that, you know, God gives science. You know, God set everything in motion and he holds everything in motion. And literally the Bible says that. You know, he created everything and he sustains everything. But when we sever them, then, you know, we only see science as anti-God.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, and so like there is that, you know, we have like a dichotomy now where it's just, okay, either you're science or either, you know, or you're all God, but not understand that God provided knowledge, provided science in a way for his creation to, you know, see his fingerprint in what he does. So like even just the cycles of like water going from gas to liquid and stuff like that, like he set everything in motion, literally.
So then how
You
do
know, where it says he opens up the heavens.
oh, I was gonna say something.
Sorry?
How do we teach a balanced scientific education in church, at school, and at home? What type of scientific education should we be providing, you know, then as a church, to not just to our children or young adults, but also to adults? How do you find that balance? What does it look like? And what type of scientific education should we be teaching?
Well,
I would start off by
my thing
saying,
is,
I was gonna say, I would start off by saying that it needs to be accurate. First and foremost, it needs to be accurate. Like, we need to know what we're teaching and that what we're teaching is accurate. I'll give you guys a very interesting and funny to me story. I used to attend a church, very Caribbean church. Everybody there was from the Caribbean. And we were talking about creation and everything. And so the teachers decided to do a debate on evolution versus creation, the Sabbath school teachers. And that was about like 14 or 15 at the time. So they chose for the evolution side, me, my sister, and another pastor's kid, because they figured, oh, okay, these are pastors' children, you know, they're gonna say we came from monkeys and blah, 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 and the creation side is gonna crush them. Now, the creation people didn't do their homework. So they just decided to come with, you know, oh, God created everything because the Bible says. Now, what we did was we did the assignment as we were told to do, which was to argue our viewpoint. So we went and we did a lot of research on evolution, like we dug deep and we came back with the arguments. So when they put us to sit and do the debate, you know, the creation people said, well, the Bible says that God exists. Like, okay, but who created God? Maybe God was the one that came out of that big bang. And like, we started giving all these facts about what evolution says, and we were really just killing those creation people. And the teachers got so like flustered and frustrated, they just shut down the debate. They were like, no, you guys should be ashamed of yourself. We believe in creation and that there's a God and da, da, da. That's it. That's all you need to know. And I remember leaving that debate so confused and shocked and kind of turned off and put off, because I felt like you guys asked us to do an assignment, which was to defend evolution. And we did what you told us to do. And there was no explanation, you know, nothing like, well, you know, could be true and I could see why, but da 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 da. It was just like, no, we don't believe that. You should be ashamed of yourself for even buying into that, for even arguing that point. You guys should have come here and said there's no defense for evolution. And then the creation people didn't do their homework. So, you know, I feel like if we're going to teach about these things and even introduce these things into our schools, into our Sabbath schools, whatever, there needs to be one proper research, and we need to be bringing accurate information, and we need to be willing to answer questions. You know, we need to be willing to answer questions, and we can't also just rely on God is the creator and not be reading the Bible to be able to explain why you believe that God is the creator. Because then it ends up creating a situation where, like that Sabbath school class, all the kids left there confused. Every man jack, as they say in the Caribbean, left there confused because the teachers didn't do a good job of, one, teaching the creation lesson, and two, explaining when something came up that was confusing. So I felt like I would lead the question with that story. Rich, go ahead. What you were gonna say?
Well,
I'm sorry.
I want to say a few things. One, that story just sums up a lot of our Christian experiences. I'm speaking for y'all because I know you guys all experience that, because what Christians love to do is we love to do the least amount of work and then put it on God. So if it doesn't matter if it's talking to someone about God, because I'm a Christian and whatever. What's your favorite text? Well, all of it. A lot of us Christians are not prepared. And when I say not prepared, we're not prepared to do any of this work. And this is the same thing. If you're going to work in the field, you go, you get a good night's rest, you hydrate, you get prepared. And the thing is, I feel as Christians, we just chuck it up as you're supposed to know. And I think that's so ludicrous because I think Jolene said it earlier. It's science and religion do have a hand in hand. Even before this pandemic, before they talked about masks and what you should do, you could have just gone to the Bible and watch how they treated leprosy, and you would have had a complete guide. Because the Bible has also talked about when you're diseased, how to quarantine. It talks about how clean you should be constantly. Like, that's the thing is we pick and choose, but we don't really know the Bible to start with. And then we try to defend God. It's like if I met this person and they believe in me, and then somebody goes to tell them to defend me, but they don't know me. And I feel like that's exactly what God is going through is all of us are claiming his name and we're throwing out his name so loose. But when it's time to defend him, when it's time to actually talk about who he is, we're lost because we don't know him. We don't know him. And it's a shame that you went through that, because I feel like being a former youth leader, that was a lot of the debates I used to have is we're not putting in the effort into our minds. Like, you can't, if you meet a scientist, tell me a scientist that's not prepared in his field. He has to go through peer reviews. There's so much you have to do before you're even accredited for you to say you're a scientist. But a Christian, it's like, well, I might pray, I might read, like you don't know, but I got the faith. So apparently, since I have the faith, when I'm debated, God's gonna give me this information to go stand and preach like if I know what I'm talking about. And that's not how it works. And it's a shame. It's really a shame that you went through it. And that's why I tell my athletes this, I try to keep myself to the standard. It's a shame that you went through that because you had a good foundation, but how many people that were there didn't have a good foundation that really did rock their faith? And it's not really on you. I'm not saying you did something wrong, but if you dare to open that box, how do you not come prepared to defend Christ? To me, that it's hurtful. It is hurtful because now you got people going back, and it's like, well, maybe evolution does have it right. And that's the thing is we're gambling with our souls. We're gambling with so much. There's so much at stake. Like, we keep on talking about the last days and how we should be prepared, but we're all not prepared. The same thing. Guys, we saw this coming in China. It's hilarious. I work in a doctor's office. We saw this in China, and in November, I was like, I'm shook. And everybody was like, Rich, you're shook? You're never shook about anything. And I said, y'all, like one, humans are nasty. We're nasty. Like, I've seen people use the bathroom. I've seen people we're nasty. And then now you have something where it demands us to have cleanliness and respect for each other. We're doomed because that is not who we're built to be. And the thing is we knew when we read Revelation, we knew all this was coming. It's the same thing when Christ finally comes. We're all gonna be shocked, but at the same time, we sit here and we're like, Cassia, Christ is coming soon. And then when he comes, we're like, oh snap, he came. Like it doesn't make sense to me because it's so much fluff that we do. It's so much. We try to make this Christianity our identity.
Yeah.
But we don't even give it a care in the world, and it's a shame because there's so much. The Bible has so much information. It's such a blessed book. We have so much examples. We have such a great support system. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's America, if it's the Caribbean, if it's Africa. Like the information is out there, and I could excuse my parents a little bit just because they know the internet, but they know the internet the same way I'm talking to you guys about how we're not prepared. Like they don't really know the internet.
Yeah.
And we have the information out there. We have it at our fingertips. Like I don't need to use this computer. I could pick up my phone and Google anything that I want. And 20 years ago, that was such a crazy thought that it's really inexcusable for us to not be prepared for a lot of the debates we're having with the world and then putting Christ behind our name. And it's something that I always reach out to people to do. I always encourage others because you can't tell me. So I'll tell you, like, and I know this is recorded, so I'm sure if my mom sees this, she's not gonna be happy by this story. But I love West Wilmington to death. I love it to death. I've been here forever. But when they asked me to go to WJA, I said, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And my mom was like, Rich, like Christian education and all this, and you could go to BMA and all this. And I threw out two things. I made my point and they had no answer for it. One, I said, does WJA give me everything that a growing boy needs? And they were like, yeah, absolutely. Christian education, everything like that. And I said, do they have a sports team? My mom said, no. I said, why? They have recess you could run outside. I said, yeah, that's not really fitness. And she was like, no, well, but Christian education is more important. Then I said this. I said, if I went to a public school and I came out of WJA, who am I more prepared for the next level education? And then my parents had to sit back and they were like, well, both schools have great things. And I said, yeah, both the schools have great things. But I said, you came to this country to give me the best education you can give me. Which one has the best education? They couldn't answer that. Why? Why can't they answer that? Because we pick and choose what we want to feed our children, right? And yes, it is easier. It is easier to have it where you're only feeding them what you want them to know. But especially in this time of internet, especially in this time of information,
you have to feed them what they need to know as well.
If they don't, and then what happens now is, like Jack said, now I sit down in college and then they tell me something that makes sense. And now I go back to you and I'm not only offended, I'm mad.
Yeah.
Because you had me going out here saying all this craziness with no evidence, right? And then when I ask you about it, it's like, well, Rich, like this is how it's always been. The Bible just is right. And show me.
And there are a lot of young people that go off to college and they are lost. They end up lost because their teachers present things to them, their college professors present things to them, and they mock them. So one, we're not even prepared to defend creation because, like you said, it's, the quarterly wrote a lesson talking about education, arts, and sciences, and kind of still tiptoed around the whole topic instead of diving deep, which is what we tend to do. And two, we give inaccurate information about what the world is so-called teaching. So when you go to college saying, oh, this is what evolution says, and the college professor looks at you and is like, and you want to believe those people who are telling you this is what evolution says, and it's not what it says, those are the people you want to listen to that don't even know. It's so important, to go back to what I said initially, it's so important for it to be accurate and honest. And Jolene, I know you wanted to make a point as well.
Yeah, definitely agree a lot with what you had said, Rich. And one of the things that makes me think of is like we want to defend God, but how are we doing that if we don't know what we are defending? And if we don't know what we're defending, then and we can't have reason for this, then what are we really doing? It's gonna all to be like, oh yes, we're Christians, so I believe in this, but if you don't know why you believe it, other than just because it's something that you were told once upon a time, where it's like you were told you must believe this, like you must believe creationism because that's what a good Seventh-day Adventist believes. Otherwise, you're going to hell. And come and go grab me my belt. Like, what are you going to do that, like, as Kezia had said, like when you maybe have a day where you're told alternative facts, you're going to buckle. Your faith is going to falter. You're going to be confused, or maybe you might decide forget everything because now your faith in your knowledge base has been rocked by something completely that you were completely unprepared for, which is one of the problems sometimes I find with Christian education sometimes, is that we think that is enough. It's like, well, but it's Christ-centered, so this should be fine. And it's like, but as Rich was saying, like, but do you got sports? We have a yard.
We have a yard.
That doesn't answer the question though. Yeah, sports, like we pray and fast. Like, no, that doesn't count. That's not everything. Like, it should be the center, but that in and of itself is not enough. Even Jesus had a trade. Like, he was a carpenter before, he picked up his full-time gig as Lord and Savior of the universe. So even if like our Lord and Savior, learned something of worldly good, then it obviously falls that our education should follow the same thing. Yes, it's good to know about the Bible and all that, but for the most part, that's not putting food in your bellies. There's not that many pastoral jobs. We need to also know as well, what else is there available? We need to know what the world is teaching as well, because when we and our children go out into the outside world, we might have to actually defend our faith or what we believe, and we need to know what is being said so that we know, oh, I believe this. Like, we're not saying, oh, we don't believe in evolution and we don't know the first thing about it, but then you might realize, oh, actually, I'm kind of jiggy maybe with natural selection to a degree. Or, oh, I found out about this example of natural selection that is happening, like that we kind of have seen within a lifetime or two. And it's like, oh, that makes sense. So even if wherever you fall on that spectrum between creationism and evolution, you're able to understand and better defend what you feel and have your faith remain intact.
And to say something about what Rich said at the very beginning, he said the devil always mixes up the truth and the lie. There's always truth in it mixed with lie, so that once one thing either is proven or disproven, it shatters the whole thing in your mind. So if you were told evolution is all of this, and there may be truth in that, and then you find out about natural selection, the devil puts in your mind like, hey, so if natural selection has actually been proven and you see that it has been proven, then what else on the outskirts that you were told isn't true is actually true? And then he plants that into your mind, So go ahead, Jack.
Yeah, I was going to say, what I'm gathering, just from what everyone is saying, is that when it comes to just like Christian education, we have the opportunity to give a holistic view, or a holistic view of just what education is supposed to be. That holistic view, just from our discussion, is something that should be implemented. And I know, like, it's just everyone has different interests, and we're gonna say that. And sports is something that, like, what is just being shared, is like all these things can be implemented in a holistic manner, in a sense, because sports is competition. So at a Christian school, that's healthy competition that can be geared and changed and stuff like that. So I know, just Oakwood, they had a basketball team, and so does WAU. So, we would go, we would face, other Christian schools and whatnot. But I know it's just the the opportunity of Christian education is to present a holistic view. And I think that's really what God intended, when, the instructions were, to teach your each generation as like, teach each generation one, what you already know, the experiences that you have gained, because, they're that being farmers or hunters and stuff like that. So it's like, along with God being, I want to say everything's being filtered through God. And that's just how, Christian education should be approached, where it's not leaning from one side or to the other, but rather maintaining that by maintaining the balance of, yes, I firmly believe that one, it being Christ-centered means that it is a holistic view of one, the reality that we're facing, that we are in a sin-marred world, and that, we can't allow our education system to kind of like put this imaginary safe bubble around our kids, and then, they're unable to function out in the real world. So we have the opportunity to be able to foster a more concrete manner of just approaching the world, because it's just being at Oakwood, it's like it was still a college campus, and you'll hear that what you're looking for is what you'll find. So does that minimize God? No, not at all. But the thing is just what's necessary is a holistic view and a concrete, holistic concrete view of what the world really entails, and not just just this fluffed up, it's just I don't want to say, I don't want to minimize like the Bible as, the beginning and the end, and all in a sense, but it's like, the Bible, and everything else that God has given us in this world, and all the knowledge, all the understanding, all the wisdom, has to be filtered through, through this lens. And like, that's opportunity that we can foster when it comes to, Christian education, Adventist education. And I think, it's just, there's so many different aspects that play into that. I don't think we really have time to really dive into that, with all the different aspects of, just whether or not the school has funding for these things and whatnot. So it's just understanding that this conversation is something that can really expand and become something concrete that, will give more opportunity for those, who are, for those who are, going to that adventure education system, so it's just, okay, we were like, with the pandemic, the traditional way, it doesn't always translate in every situation. So there has to be adaptation in a sense. And, just using the word evolution loosely, it's like, no, we have to adapt, when it comes, we have to evolve in the realm of adaptation to our situations, to how we approach ministry, to how we approach education, where it's not just one-sided in a sense.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Joel.
Yeah, I was just going to add, and maybe in terms of just the practice of how this education is presented, I think one of the biggest challenges with the way we go about, teaching the Christian principles is that we are so concerned with telling people what to believe, right? And I think the advantage and maybe the value that we can find in science that maybe even puts more people to science is this idea that you are always left having to be curious about things, right? How do things work, right? And I think even as we talk about Christian education, we should be thinking about how can it be framed around how to properly think about your beliefs and how beliefs are formed. Because I think for a lot of people, because even for you when you went into this debate, is people just come and spew what they have been told and what things are without having a framework of how it all comes together. So if somebody takes a piece out, you even don't know how to recalibrate and reform a good cogent presentation. And I think the Christian education has to now also be looking at how do we train young people and how to train people who are believing about how they believe and how to think about what they believe, and not just to think about what they should believe, right? Not just to be concerned about this is what you should believe and just hold it like it is. So don't play around with it. Don't try to think around with it, which puts us at a risk, because when you meet people who are really good at going at these arguments, it's very hard to then make a very good contention for what you believe.
So, we come to a close, and like Jack said, there's so much that could be said, so much, because we only touched on the science portion. We didn't even touch on, Christian education as it relates to the arts. But that's a whole different, it's a whole different ball game. But in closing, there's one question that I think wraps it up. And Jolene, you mentioned the word faith, where it's important for us to teach that faith first, right? Because like I mentioned earlier, we cannot scientifically prove a God in that sense. Everything that we believe in Christianity comes from faith first. And in faith, we believe. So why is it critical to encourage faith, one, and two, to believe in, know, and understand God as the creator? Why is that critical in our Christian experience? To know, to have faith in, believe in, know, and understand God as a creator. And I want everybody to answer that in like a sentence or two.
I think the basis of my answer to that would be that faith is the evidence of things that we can't see, right? So it's like a knowledge, but then it's not just like, oh, I believe that. Like I think like belief and faith are like kind of different things in my opinion, because faith is more of, I know this because, well, you don't really have a because, but it's I know this, and you just know it in your heart. And I think that goes along with that, the ability to back up your faith, even though we can't prove it scientifically. I think we should not demonize knowledge. So the more that we know about the different things that other people have faith in, the more I can stand firm, believe like in myself that this is what I truly believe, this is what I truly know to be right. And the more I know about other things, the more I can kind of affirm that for myself. So I think that's a big part of it for me.
Jolene, we're gonna go to you.
Okay. I agree a lot with what Anaya said. And faith and belief, they come together and they help to kind of make things make sense. They create a framework for how to look at the world and because of God, you have a certain framework where you have God at the center of things. God seen in creation, God seen in like my laptop. Like he created people who created with brains who are able to think up this kind of thing, who are able to figure out, hey, the things that God created, these components can work together to create something beautiful, to create something that's kind of like the center of my little universe to a degree, because Lord knows there's nothing to do in quarantine, but it creates a framework.
Right, Joel, why is it important to have faith in believing, knowing, and understanding God as the creator?
Because without that, the whole view of who we are and who the people around us are disintegrates. And knowing that God being creator has installed that very initial value in all of us, that we are now being called to hold up and to serve, becomes what forms the foundation of how we operate in the world. And so without believing that, without having faith that God is the creator of these things and the beginner and the one who continues to sustain them, we will lose sight and a proper sense of how to exist in the world.
Jack, I'm gonna go to you.
I think we would just kind of walk around unbalanced in our worldview, in a sense, and just understanding, walking in faith, and understanding him and understanding him as creator just gives us a more balanced view, and we can approach the arts, we can approach the sciences, we can approach these different subjects that he himself has his hand in a more balanced view, where it's not just I'm right, you're wrong, but rather, okay, I see God's hand, I see evidence of him and these different aspects that he has allowed to come to fruition.
And Rich.
Jack, I absolutely agree with everything you said. I see it as it's everything, because I mean, to me, Christ is everything that I am. It's I can't even separate myself from him. It's so ingrained in me, and I love that. But the only thing I could really say with the faith is we have to be comfortable with giving everybody the knowledge that they can make the choice for themselves, because Christ doesn't need us to protect things like from other people. Like it's hard for me when it's almost like cheating. It's like, why do you need to do this for Christ? Like, is he not able to work in your life? Is he not able to create those same miracles? So it's just, for me, it's giving everybody all the facts and then letting the Holy Spirit do its job, because not everybody is going to agree. Not everybody is going to make it easy. But I see Christian education, I see when we learn in our schools as somewhere where we're learning everything everybody else is learning. It's supposed to be somewhere where you have like minds surrounded, so you're not ostracized by your faith. And unless we give Christians in those places all the information they need, so they're prepared when they step outside, I think we're doing a disservice to our up and coming generation. Because when you go to war, if this is a spiritual war, when you go to war, you have training camp, you have things that prepare you for hostile situations, and I don't believe we do that. And I feel like that's so part of Christ as well, because he's creating all of us to be soldiers, to be ministers, to go out and preach his word. And if we don't know his word, we're ineffective. So my biggest thing is just give us the tools we need to succeed and let Christ do the rest.
So in closing, first I'd like to thank the panel for joining us today. Thank you, Jolene, for virtually joining us all the way from New York. No, it was a really long drive for you to get here, but
long. You guys have to reimburse me my gas money.
But the whole idea of knowing, understanding, believing in God as the creator is that Ellen White actually says in her book Education that the goal of education is to restore in man the image of his maker. And how do we know, like Joel said, how do we know our identity if we don't know who created us? How can we be restored to the image of God if we don't know God? And it also gives us an idea and a promise of salvation to know that there's a God who created us and who loves us, right? When a child builds something out of Legos and they put all their heart and energy into building this thing out of Legos, and somebody comes and breaks that, it's going to break that child's heart, because that's something that they put their blood, sweat, and tears into. And that's how God feels about each and every one of his creations, that he loves each of us. He made us in his image. And so he wants to redeem and restore us. And when we understand God as creator, and we believe that God has created everything that we see, and that his goal is to restore to him what was rightfully his, gives us a promise of salvation, which the goal to Christianity, or the goal of Christianity, is to be saved, to be reconnected, and to be, I guess, rejoined with our Father and our Creator. So with that, I guess I'm gonna put somebody on the spot and I'm gonna ask Joel to pray.
Sure. Thank you, Father, for gathering us here, and thank you for the time you've spent just wrestling with issues that are clearly complex and wide, and yet still to conclude with a sense that we need to keep pressing in and trusting that you are above it all, and that you are God, and to have faith that even in the midst of all this information and all this knowledge and all these different perspectives, that you are working us into even more convinced of your being and of your existence. We thank you, and we thank you for all the individuals who are able to make it this evening. We ask that, Lord, even as we close, that you will be with each and every one of them in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.